Today I wish to talk about the different kind of pulse methods. So let's take a quick overview of some of the most important pulse methods that are available to practitioners to evaluate the energetic level of the patient. So what I will describe here is what is given to us thanks to the classic text. So this is not really an exhaustive list. I will describe some of the most important methods only. And you must also know that in the world, most acupuncturists are usually focusing on the what we call the method of the Zhang and Fu, the method, the pulse diagnosis of the organs. And as you will see, this method, which is described in the Nanjing, is only one of the many different kind of pulse methods that is available. So, there is in fact nothing mysterious about this. Any acupuncturist, regardless of his or her training, has heard about the yin-yang, the three burners, the four energies, so which means the ancestral energy, blood, nutritional energy, and defensive energy. So nutritional energy, yin qi or yang qi, and wei qi, which corresponds to the defensive energy. You also have the 5 elements. The 6 layers. The 8 extraordinary vessels. And of course, the 12 organs. So the 12 organs. So as you see here, I have placed the 12 organs at the end. Why? Because before asking about the state of, before thinking about the state of the organs, you must understand the general state of the patient. You must understand how is the yin-yang, the 3 burners, the 4 energies, the 5 elements, the 6 layers, the 8 extraordinary vessels. So the organs are really at the end. They should be analyzed only at the end of the diagnosis. Because if you have balanced the yin-yang, the 5 elements, and the other elements that are described here, usually, in most cases, the organs will balance themselves. So let's start with the most important concept, the yin-yang. So without going into, I would say, details, every acupuncturist knows that the top, the back, the left, and the external part corresponds to the yang. And the bottom, the front, the right, and the internal corresponds to the yin. This allows us to compare two things, well, even three things. First, the left and right. So the left pulse will correspond to the yang, and the right pulse to the yin. But the yin-yang can also be analyzed thanks to a comparison between the superficial pulse, which corresponds to the external part, or the top, and the deep pulse, the bottom or the internal. So this is one way of analyzing the yin-yang. This is the second one. And the third one, well, the top corresponds to what? To the top of the body. So the upper burner, and the bottom corresponds to the lower part of the body, to the lower burner. So everything that is above the barrier gives us information about the yang, and the energy underneath the barrier corresponds to the yin. So upper burner, and lower burner. The surface, the pulse of the surface and the deep pulse are described in the Nanjing, in the sixth difficulty of the Nanjing, so Nanjing 6, and in the Maijing, Book 1, Chapter 9. Okay. Concerning the upper burner and lower burner, I will tell you more about it when we will discuss the three burners. So this is for the yin-yang. But even for the yin-yang, as you know, there are different qualities of the pulse. And you will have also yang qualities and yin qualities. But I will not describe them here, it's a bit too long. But you should know that even the qualities of the yin-yang should be analyzed. And this is a good way for you to know if a patient is more yin or yang. Another aspect also of the yin-yang is what we call blood and energy. So we are talking here about nutrition and concerning energy, about movement, defense, and also the capacity of awareness. This is more the yang, and here the yin. But when we say blood and energy, of what part of the body are we talking about? Well, here, if we take the general body, we can divide the body in two parts, the trunk and the limbs. The trunk corresponds to the inner part of the body. It's at the center of the body, while the limbs and the head are on the outer part of the body. So I would say that the right pulse will give you information about the trunk, and the left one, the left pulse, will give you information about the limbs. And you will know, just by comparing the different levels of the pulse, if there is more blood or energy. If the limbs are properly fed, if they have enough energy to defend, to move, to perceive the environment, and the same about the trunk. You can obtain the same information. Next, we have the 3 burners. The 3 burners divide the human body in 3 levels, which corresponds to heaven, man, and earth. So the upper part of the body, which is above the diaphragm, corresponds to the upper burner. The part between the diaphragm and the navel corresponds to the middle burner, and what is underneath the navel corresponds to the lower burner. And we can divide the pulse, so here and here, in 3 parts. Here you have the right one and the left one. So here you have the upper burner, middle burner, lower burner. And you can analyze the pulse of the burners. All this is described in chapter 2, well, in difficulty 2, 3, and 4 of the Nanjing. In the Maijing, in book 1, chapter 3, in book 1, chapter 4, in Maijing 2, chapter 1, and Maijing 2, chapter 3. So if you want to look for the text, you can have this information in these books. Concerning the 4 energies, so the ancestral energy, the blood, nutritional energy, and Wei Qi, defensive energy. Here, it's more a question of quality of the pulse. For each of these energies, you have specific qualities of the pulse that are described. So I will not develop them here, but if you are not really aware of these different pulse qualities, you will not be able to know if a patient is blood deficient, yin qi deficient, or deficient in ancestral energy, and so on. But there is something really important here, because you have to observe things from the deepest energy, the most important one, to the most superficial one. So there is an order of treatments, I would say. So you have to treat first the ancestral energy, then blood, then nutritional, and then defensive. Because without ancestral energy, well, you are dead. So even if you are treating blood, nutritional, and defensive energy, the only thing that you are doing is treating the branch. You are not treating the root of the problem. If the problem is at the level of blood, treating the defensive energy or nutritional energy is just useless. You can combine sometimes the treatments together, but you always have to find a way to treat at least the deepest level. Otherwise, you will be using too much energy to treat the other level, the most superficial level, and it will exhaust the deepest one. Next, concerning the 5 elements. Here we have several different techniques, methods that are described. First, we have the circulation between the 5 elements. So, circulation between the 5 elements. This method has been transmitted to the Western acupuncturists, thanks to Georges Soulier de Moran. But you find it in Nanjing 18. Nanjing 18. Second, you have the pulse of the 5 layers. So this is described in Maijing, in book 1, chapter 6 of the Maijing. Maijing 1, chapter 6. And also in in the 5th difficulty of the Nanjing. Of the Nanjing, sorry. Nanjing 5. Next, you have the quality of the pulses, according to the 5 elements. So the qualities. This is described in the 15th difficulty of the Nanjing. So Nanjing 15. And 4, the fourth analysis of the pulse of the 5 elements, is given in the Maijing, in the 3rd book of the Maijing. So in Maijing 3, Maijing 3 describes the energy of the elements according to the 4 seasons. So this is it for the 5 elements. Concerning the 6 layers, the specific pulses of the 6 layers is described in the 7th difficulty of the Nanjing. So Nanjing 7. In the 5th book of the Maijing, Maijing 5, chapter 2. In the Zhenjui Jiayi Jing, book 4, chapter 1. Zhenjui. So, book 4, chapter 1. Concerning the 8 marvelous vessels, you have a description of the pulse of the 8 marvelous vessels in the Maijing, book 2, part 4. So my Zhang, book 2, part 4. The different references that I have given you here concerning these different aspects is not an exhaustive list of where you can find this information. It's some of the chapters that I have found, but you can find others in the classic text. And finally, you have the pulse of the organs. But you must know that concerning the pulse of the organs, depending on the classic text that you are referring to, you have different organization of the pulse. For example, in the Maijing, in the lower burner on the right side, it corresponds to Mingmen. But in the Nanjing, it corresponds to the heart protector. And you have other possibilities that have been described in different classical texts. So you see here, we have really a different panel of possibilities to analyze a patient's state. You can analyze him in yin-yang, in 3 burners, in 5 elements. And most of the time, you have to use all these concepts at the same time. But you have to start from the beginning. And the beginning is what? It's the yin-yang. And after that, you have to know if the energy between heaven and earth is communicating. So it corresponds to the 3 burners. And how the organs are communicating between each other, the 5 elements, and so on. So if, again, you concentrate on a single organ because you find a pulse, I don't know, of the gallbladder which is extremely strong, well, you're missing the point. Maybe it's just an excess of the yang and the deficiency of the yin, or it's a problem of the 3 burners, or whatever. So understanding the exchange of the movement of the energy in the body is more important than understanding what organ is deficient or is in excess. Now, I have described a different way of taking the pulse is the radial pulse. But you also have other ways, which are described in the Neijing especially. And in the Ling Shu, you have what we call the pulse of Ren Ying Kunku, which corresponds, according to some masters, to the pulse of stomach 9 and lung 9. And I'm saying according to some masters because here, depending on the interpretation, some masters say that it corresponds more to the left and right, a comparison between the left and right pulse. But this is not the subject of this video, so I will not develop this. But here you see, if we consider that we are talking about the of stomach 9 and lung 9, it becomes extremely difficult to know how to analyze this pulse. Why? Because first of all, you must know that Georges Soulier-de-Morand described this in his book, and he said about this method that he spent some time looking for a master to teach him this technique. And all the people he met told him that this method was lost. And recently, I have seen many people saying that they know this technique. Sincerely, unless you can find someone who can demonstrate that he has been taught this technique by a real Taoist master, I would say that anyone who pretends to know this technique only based on the book may miss the most important aspect of this pulse diagnosis. Why? Because you have different ways of interpreting this pulse. First, we are comparing what? The carotid with the radial artery. Well, you understand here that it's not the same size of artery. So how can you compare these two arteries? Next, what do you compare precisely? Are you using the left or the right pulse for lung 9? Some masters say that you have to use the left pulse for men and the right pulse for women. And you have to use the left or right side of the carotid. This can be one interpretation. But there is another one, which is the following. Lung 9 corresponds to the inner energy and stomach 9 to the outer energy. So normally, the outer energy corresponds to the yang, so it should be taken on the left side, and lung 9 should be taken on the right side because it's more yin. So you see, you have different possibilities, and unless you can find someone who can teach you really how this technique is applied, well, you are lying to yourself. You are just interpreting what you found in the book. In the Ling Shu chapter 9, and it is described also in the Ling Shu chapter 48, and if in other classical texts. So here we have to be really careful. Opening the books, the classical books, and starting to read them and analyze them is not sufficient. That's why the transmission of the knowledge from master to student is so important. Many books, many classical texts gives information that are not sufficient if you do not have someone to teach you how to analyze them, how to interpret them. So oral transmission is really extremely important here. So what other possibilities do we have? What other kind of pulse diagnosis? Well, in So 1 chapter 6, in books, So 1 book 6, chapter 20, the So 1 describes what we call the pulse of heaven, man, and earth. This has nothing to do with the pulse of the three burners. It's a way of taking the pulse in different parts of the body. And you are in fact palpating different arteries of the body. And at the heaven level, which corresponds to the head, you will have the heaven of heaven, the level of man of heaven, and the level of earth in heaven. And the same concerning the other two. Well, you can read chapter 20 of the So 1 to understand what I'm talking about. The same pulse diagnosis is also given in Maijing book 4. In the Zhenjui Jiajing book 4 chapter 3, sorry, I will not write it because it's a bit too long. You also have the pulse of what we call, when we compare stomach 9 and stomach 42, which allows you to understand how the energy is produced and distributed in the body. Next, you also have the abdominal pulse diagnosis, so a palpation of the abdominal pulse. You also have the palpation of the great luer of the stomach. So it's stomach 18. Which is described in the Zhenjui Jiajing book 4 chapter 1. And you have many other ways of taking the pulse that have been developed by masters, modern masters recently, but also you can find, I would say that during the 20th century, some Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean masters have developed their own way of taking the pulse. So you see there is so many possibilities. But before trying to develop your own, I would say that you should first study the classics. The classic texts are full of knowledge. So why do we study all these methods? Well, first because Chinese medicine is based on the principle that one must have a global vision before having a specialized vision of the patient. So taking the pulse of the organs is a specialized vision of the body. So you are not able, only based on the organs, to understand how the human body of your patient is interacting with the universe. So when we take the pulse, we have to start from the beginning, as I said before. Yin Yang, 3 burners, 4 energies, 5 elements, and so on. Moreover, if you have taken the trouble to read the classical texts, you will have noticed that the pulse of the organs is quite a late interpretation. You have, in the Neijing, there is a description of the pulse. But the description of the pulse given in the Neijing do not mention organs, the pulse of the organs. So the master of this of long ago were using a way of taking the pulse which was based on the communication between the human body and the universe. The understanding that the human body is part of the universe. We are here as to transmit information between heaven and earth. Imagine if you remove from the universe everything that is alive, what we consider as a level of men. You have the planet, you have heaven, and in between there is nothing. What is the meaning of the universe in that case? The new universe becomes, I would say, starts to be real only when there is a life form. Without a life form to communicate between earth and heaven, the universe has no meaning. So that's why the communication of the energies in our body is so important for the Chinese. So this is an overview of all the different pulse methods that we are teaching at the Classical Acupuncture Academy. And this is being taught during the 4 years of study. So don't worry, this is something that you will learn to understand step by step. And it is something that we are using all the day in our practice. And we start from the yin yang, next the 3 burners, and we go next to the 5 elements, and so on. So by following these different steps, you will never make any mistakes. Because if you are concentrating on the organs, you may miss just the general picture. So again, what is important is to have this general understanding of the movement of energy in the patient's body. But as I said, it's just an overview. So it takes at least 4 years to understand, to start practicing all of these methods. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I invite you to follow us on our Facebook page. If you have any question, do not hesitate. Really, I would be glad to answer you. If you have any subjects that you want me to discuss, just write us, and I will be glad to make maybe another video, or just make a written answer. And even if you have, I would say, a constructive critics of this, of what I said, do not hesitate. I will be glad to read you and to answer your comments. You can, so as I said, you can follow us on our Facebook page. You can also visit our internet site. And if you are interested, well, contact us. See you soon.